Just minutes ago, a secret connection to a legendary GH villain was uncovered, and it proves that Ross isn't in town for business, he's here for blood. Stay tuned, because the name we're about to reveal changes everything you thought you knew about the current power struggle in Port Charles. Hello everyone and welcome to my. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the support me and give this video a thumbs up. Ross Collum's entrance in Port Charles sent tremors throughout the tight-knit society almost immediately. Despite the fact that he appeared to be simply another sharp-suited figure from the mysterious world of international espionage, Collum, played with terrifying reserve by Andrew Hawkes, arrived on the scene in mid-January as the WSB's director, a position with enormous power and even more secret intentions. His debut episode was filled with purposeful tension as viewers watched him engage with characters already immersed in duplicity and danger. Jen Sidwell, the enigmatic criminal genius played by Carlo Ritta, had long been pulling strings from behind the scenes, planning plans that jeopardized the stability of countless lives in town. The actual surprise came when it was revealed that Collum was not just a bystander or a neutral overseer. He was Sidwell's hidden collaborator, the one who had been supporting and exacerbating the turmoil all along. This revelation was like a thunderclap, shattering many people's delicate trust in the institutions designed to protect them. The WSB, long portrayed as a powerful but problematic agency in the general hospital world, now appears to be compromised at the top levels. Jack Brennan, the agent who had been negotiating his own conflicting loyalties under Collum's supervision, looked at his superior with a mix of betrayal and calculation. Brennan had always walked a delicate line between duty and personal survival, but learning that the man who gave him orders was working with a hazardous agent like Sidwell caused him to reconsider every directive, mission, and alliance he had built. Hawk's quiet brutality in the part made Collum's presence seem unavoidable. He spoke in measured tones, his eyes betraying nothing, and his remarks held the weight of someone who had already chosen the destiny of those around him. Fans online erupted in speculation as soon as Collum's name appeared on screen. Some claimed the persona bore an uncanny similarity to previous villains, particularly the infamous Caesar Faison, whose legacy of psychological anguish and criminal enterprises haunted Port Charles for years after his death. They claimed that Collum's temperament reflected Faison's cold, piercing look, which could reveal a person's secrets in seconds. Theory circulated that Collum was either Faison's secret son, stashed away and nurtured for a life of manipulation, or a brother long forgotten in the convoluted web of Faison's family history. Others went further, proposing brainwashing or surgical modifications, citing the soap's history of dramatic resurrections and identity shifts. While the show had not yet verified any such link, the visual similarities in Collum's premeditated cruelties sparked endless debate, transforming casual viewers into amateur detectives, putting together clues from previous episodes and character backstories. As the weeks passed, Collum's influence spread like a creeping poison among the town's main figures. Britt Westbourne, who had returned on her own traumatic voyage, became immersed in his plots when he began restricting access to key medical services that she needed. The atmosphere in her meetings with Collum was fraught with unsaid threats. He wielded control over life or death decisions without ever raising his voice, making him considerably more dangerous than outright villains. Jason Morgan, ever the guardian and enforcer, instantly viewed Collum as a greater threat than Sidwell himself. In quiet meetings with allies, Jason laid out the stakes. Sidwell was an obvious threat, while Collum worked within the system, utilizing official channels to conceal his misdeeds. This rendered him untouchable, which infuriated even the most resourceful operatives in Port Charles. Sonny Corinthos, who was no stranger to power plays and betrayals, saw the shift almost instinctively. His world had always revolved on street dealings and personal vendettas. But Collum symbolized something colder, a bureaucratic evil disguised as respectability. When Sonny and Jason began aggressively targeting Collum, the conflict seemed inevitable. Collum did not back down. Instead, he retaliated with clever maneuvers, using his WSB authority to complicate their efforts while furthering his own agenda. The cooperation with Sidwell appeared to be for mutual benefit. Perhaps shared earnings from illicit enterprises or a wider geopolitical plot that reached far beyond Port Charles's borders, but the dynamic hinted at strain. Sidwell's colorful flair clashed with Collum's chilly precision, implying that their cooperation could fail under pressure. Meanwhile, in the halls of General Hospital, the ripple effects began to affect regular life. Doctors and nurses talked of increased federal monitoring, paperwork delays that appeared to be intentional, and patients whose treatments were jeopardized by strange actions. Carly Spencer, with her quick instincts and intense protectiveness, ran across Collum early on, and the meeting left her troubled. She had auditioned opposite Hawks in a critical part, and the energy between them translated beautifully on screen, her defiance meeting his unwavering serenity. Carly cautioned others that Collum wasn't just another thief. He was the type who could devastate lives without ever getting his hands dirty. As Collum's role grew more prominent, the political undercurrents intensified. Figures such as Laura Collins were cornered by events he set in motion, while others such as Willow faced challenges exacerbated by his dark presence. Jocelyn Jacks, who was becoming increasingly involved in WSB operations, faced growing hazards as Collum potentially exposed her affiliations. The threat was not imminent violence, but the gradual deterioration of safety nets. The realization that someone in charge saw her as expendable. Brennan's concern for her grew, causing divisions inside the agency as loyalty to Collum dwindled among those who saw through his facade. Collum's character was captivating because of the subtlety of his malice. Unlike explosive antagonists who resorted to guns and dramatic gestures, he used paperwork, monitoring, and institutional authority as weapons. His quietly ruthless temperament, as Hawks described in interviews, enabled layers of performance, subtle adjustments in expression, pauses that communicated volumes, and a voice that never needed to rise to terrify. This technique fit in perfectly with General Hospital's heritage of combining high-stakes drama and personal relationships, as Collum's actions prompted characters to examine their pasts, rethink their futures, and reconsider who they could trust. Deeper revelations were the subject of much speculation. Some expected Collum's past to tie into long, dormant phase and plot lines, possibly exposing a familiar relationship that explained his innate ruthlessness. Others speculated that he was preparing for a wider plot involving foreign players, one that may bring in more returning characters or resurrect past dangers. The show's history of stunning twists, temporary deaths, identities switched by surgery or deception kept viewers on edge, waiting for the next layer to be revealed. Conversations in Port Charles Hospital waiting rooms and living rooms centered on Collum's motivations. Was he motivated by greed, power, or something personal? His unwavering focus implied a grudge, possibly against the exact town that had foiled villains before him. Jason's murder threats and Sonny's planned approaches hinted to an imminent showdown. But Collum stayed one step ahead, anticipating resistance. Even as allies like Britt and Brennan worked against him, he adapted, converting apparent flaws into advantages. The shocking aspect of his identity reveal was not just his connection with Sidwell, but also what it represented. Corruption at the highest levels when Guardians become predators. Poor Charles had dealt with mobsters, mad scientists, and corporate schemers. But a villain implanted in world intelligence introduced a new level of anxiety. Every phone call, official document, and whispered order now carried the potential taint of Collum's power. As February progressed, the stakes became bigger. Sidwell exposed flaws in vital connections, while Collum plucked strings from afar, casting doubt and stirring discontent. Jason's confrontations became increasingly direct. But Collum's poise never wavered. The actor's performance depicted a man who saw chaos as a weapon rather than an emotion, someone who could observe lives crumble with detached pleasure. The consequences left the community in shock. Families questioned ties, friendships frayed under mistrust, and many battled with how far the rot had extended. Collum's arrival prompted a reckoning. In a town founded on secrets, who could claim moral superiority when even the guards were corrupted? Throughout the drama pulsed with General Hospital's typical intensity, love challenged, betrayals revealed, and redemption saw amid darkness. Ross Collum stood in the center. A guy whose unexpected identity as Sidwell's partner and WSB director had defied expectations, leaving everyone from characters to viewers astonished by the depth of his deception and the calm horror of his power. Whether his true origins were linked to Phazon or represented a completely new evil, the revelation had irreversibly altered the landscape of Port Charles, laying the groundwork for conflicts that promised to undermine the pillars of trust and authority in ways no one had predicted. The town held its breath, waiting for the next move from a man who played the long game with terrifying precision, knowing that in the world of spies and secrets, the most dangerous threats frequently took the form of authority itself. The rain dropped in steady, methodical sheets against the Metro Court's windows, distorting the city into silver and shadowy streaks. Port Charles's secrets had always been kept in the silent gaps between heartbeats. The pauses before a truth was revealed loudly. Tonight, those secrets pressed hard on the walls, as if the air itself knew that something was going to alter forever. Ross Collum stood alone near the bar, his reflection fragmented in the mirror behind the amber and clear bottles. To anyone watching, he appeared to be exactly what he had cultivated: calm, polite, and little aloof. The type of man who never really invited questioning, the type of man who knows how to hide in plain sight. His pulse, however, was loud and quick on the inside. The telegram had arrived an hour earlier, brief, but devastating in its simplicity. They know. Meet me tonight. Pier 52. Ross had looked at the screen until it went dark, his reflection in the glass glaring back at him. For years, he had assumed that time was his ally, that if the past is neglected for long enough, it will weary of knocking. He had been wrong. Poor Charles's past never knocked. It kicked down the door. Across the room, eyes were following him without his knowledge. Anna Dean noted how tightly his hand gripped the glass he wasn't sipping from. Laura Collins sensed a shift in the room, a slight change in the pace of discourse that always precedes chaos. Even Sonny Corinthos, who had learned to read danger, like sailors read storms, realized something was amiss about the man who had suddenly entered their orbit. Ross eventually went, leaving a few bucks on the counter. He did not glance back. He could not afford to. The pier was silent except for the creak of wood and the distant sound of waves crashing against pylons. The fog drifted in thick and dense, shrouding the night in mystery. Ross moved cautiously, his sneakers echoing too loudly in the silence. Every instinct told him to turn around and disappear into the city, never looking back. But the communication had been overly specific and informative. Whoever sending it knew just where to find him. "You always like dramatic entrances," a voice said from the shadows. Ross froze, the name sticking in his throat like an unfinished confession. A figure moved into the faint yellow light of a flickering lamp. Older, slimmer, with lines on his face from years of regret and rage. His eyes, however, remained the same. Ross saw the same eyes every morning. In the mirror. "You're not supposed to be here," Ross eventually stated. The man laughed quietly. "That is funny. You're not supposed to exist." The silence between them was thick and oppressive. The city appeared to hold its breath. "I kept my end of the deal," Ross stated. "I stayed away. I've changed my name. I vanished." "You hid," the man replied. "There is a difference." Ross averted his gaze, his mouth hardening. "What do you want?" "You need to quit pretending to be someone you're not." The man took a step closer. "Port Charles is full with people who live and die for the truth. Do you honestly believe you can make a life here without it catching up to you?" Before Ross could respond, footsteps reverberated behind them. "Funny," said a familiar voice filled with distrust. "That's exactly what I was thinking." Anna stepped forward, her gaze shifting between the two men. In her view, coincidences did not exist. Two men who appeared to be reflections of one another meeting in the fog at midnight. That was a confessional waiting to happen. Ross felt the walls close in. He had practiced 1,000 falsehoods for 1,000 different scenarios, but this was the one he had never allowed himself to consider. "Not like this. Not here." "You've been lying to us," Anna stated calmly. "To everyone." Ross opened and then closed his mouth. The truth pressed forward, demanding to be revealed. He could feel it in his chest, heavy and searing. I didn't come here to hurt anyone, he finally answered. I came here because I'm tired of running. I desired a life that was not based on blood and secrets. The other man sneered. How's that working out for you? Anna's gaze hardened. Blood and secrets? That's not exactly small conversation. Ross caught her gaze and for the first time since arriving in Port Charles stopped faking. The mask slid slightly, revealing the horror behind. My real name, he murmured softly. Isn't Ross Collum? The words seemed to bounce across the ocean, bouncing off the fog and disappearing into the darkness. Anna's look remained the same, but her stance changed. She was as still as if she were braced for impact. So, who are you? She asked. Ross gulped. He could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. I am the son of a man who was destined to die. A man whose name has more haters than friends in this town. I changed my name because his enemies were seeking for me. The other man approached Ross, resting a hand on his shoulder with bitterness. Tell her the rest. Ross shut his eyes. My father didn't die, he said. He pretended he died, and I helped him do it. The fog thickened and swallowed the pier in stillness. Anna stared at him, the gravity of his revelations sinking in. You're saying you're connected to someone we all thought was gone, she remarked softly. Someone dangerous? Yes, and you thought you could simply go into Port Charles and start over. Her voice was not angry. It was exhausted. This town doesn't let people outrun who they are. This time, the footsteps were rapid. Laura appeared at the end of the pier, her face tense with apprehension. Sonny's presence behind her was clear with a subtle gravity that drew all eyes to him. What is going on? Laura asked. Ross felt the final thread of control fall through his fingers. The truth was no longer his to hold, and it kept her gaze fixed on him. Our guest here has been using a phony name. He's connected to someone from our history, someone we all thought was dead. Laura's breath caught. Who? Ross hesitated before speaking the name he had avoided for years. The name that defined his existence in the shadows. The reaction was quick. Laura's eyes widened. Sonny's jaws constricted. The night itself seems to withdraw. That's impossible. Laura said quietly. We saw him die. You saw what he wanted you to see. Ross quipped. He's been living the entire time and now he's coming back. The other man nodded. He's already in town. There was a ripple of tension throughout the gathering. Poor Charles has endured wars, betrayals, and ghosts rising from the dead. However, some ghosts left long-lasting impacts. Sonny took a step ahead. If he's here, that puts a lot of people in danger. That's why I stayed away, Ross went on. I didn't want any of you pulled into this. And yet, here we are, she said. Because secrets don't stay buried in this town. Ross looked at each of them individually, noting the lines of worry on their features. For the first time, he realized that his quiet had not protected them. It had merely slowed the fallout. I'll tell you everything, he replied. All names, every lie, every reason I ran. But you need to know something first, Laura said softly. What? I didn't come here to betray Port Charles, Ross explained. I came here because I wanted to cease being my father's shadow. I wanted to be someone authentic. The other man laughed softly. You do not get to decide who you are, brother. You only have to decide what to do with it. The word brother hung in the air like a final revelation. Anna's gaze flickered between them. Brother. Ross nodded. He is my older brother. The person who refused to run. The one who stayed behind to clean up our father's messes while I was gone. Silence fell again, this time heavier. Family secrets in Port Charles have the ability to detonate entire lives. So what happens now? Sonny inquired. Ross took a slow breath. Now the truth is out. And whatever storm comes, I will meet it here. Laura approached with a kinder expression. You should know. Poor Charles has a complicated relationship with second chances, but we believe in them. Ross forced a tired smile. I am not seeking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to make things right. Thunder rumbled in the distance, low and threatening. The city lights fluctuated and then stabilized. A guy who had been proclaimed dead was on his way to recovering the life he had left behind. And Ross Collum, no longer just Ross Collum, stood on the verge of truth, knowing that by morning nothing in Port Charles would be the same.